The village of Ashford was a small scattering of cabins along the edge of the Connecticut River, where gossip traveled faster than the current. To the people there, life was about strength. Men who could chop oak in a single swing, women who could haul water from the well without spilling a drop. In such a place, Clara Bennett's name was often followed by a shake of the head or a knowing smirk. She had been sickly since childhood. A fever at the age of 7 had left her frail, her bones thinner than the other girls, her stamina nearly non-existent. While they could carry heavy pails of water or knead bread dough for hours, Clara had to rest after a short walk. The boys mocked her openly. The older women whispered that she'd never find a husband, not with hands so pale and arms so thin. It was the spring of 1777, and the war had wrapped itself around every conversation. The British were pushing hard into the countryside, seeking to cut off rebel supply lines. Patriot soldiers sometimes passed through Ashford, but never stayed long. They knew the king's men had informants even in quiet villages. The locals claimed they wanted no trouble, yet most leaned loyalist. The British Crown, after all, had provided stability and trade. Only a few, like Clara's late father, had spoken openly for independence. Clara's father had died 2 winters before, leaving her and her mother to fend for themselves. With no brothers and no husband, the heavy work fell to neighbors' charity. Charity often given with a look that said you ought to be able to do this yourself. Her mother took in mending and laundry to keep food on the table. Clara did what she could, tending the small garden, reading aloud to her mother at night, but it never felt enough. That morning, Clara had walked to the well with a small pail, ignoring the whispers from 2 women standing nearby. As she lowered the bucket, she caught their words. "Poor thing," one said, voice dripping with false pity. "Can't even carry water for her own household." "She'll be no use when the soldiers come," the other replied. "Best hide behind the menfolk and pray." Clara's cheeks burned, but she kept her head down. She had learned that answering back only made the gossip sharper. As she made her way home, she noticed movement in the tree line beyond the fields. At first she thought it might be a deer, but then a figure stumbled into view. Tall, dressed in a torn Continental officer's coat, his dark hair matted with sweat and dirt. He collapsed to one knee, gripping his side. Even from a distance, she saw the red spreading across his shirt. Her first instinct was to run for help, but something in his eyes stopped her. Wild, urgent, and terrified. He raised a hand in warning. "Please," he rasped. "No one must know I'm here." Clara's heart pounded. She glanced back toward the village. If the wrong ears heard, the British loyalists would deliver this man straight into enemy hands. She didn't know his name or why he was here, but she knew one thing. The British didn't bleed for nothing, and the look in his eyes meant danger, perhaps for them both. Still, without another word, she stepped off the path and moved toward him. Clara crouched beside the wounded man, her hands trembling. Up close, she could see the gash in his side, deep, angry, and still bleeding. The smell of iron filled her nose. His breathing was ragged, but his eyes stayed sharp, flicking toward the village road as though expecting soldiers at any moment. You need a doctor," Clara whispered. His lips pressed into a grim line. "No doctor. No one must know. The British are close." Clara swallowed hard. She'd heard stories of rebel officers hunted down and hanged within days of capture. "If they're looking for you, then why?" "I was ambushed," he cut in, his voice low but firm. "My men are scattered. I have orders, vital orders that must reach General Washington. If I'm caught, they die, and the message dies with me." His words struck her like a cold wind. Whoever he was, he carried something the British feared, and that alone made him dangerous to shelter. Clara's mind raced. If anyone in Ashford discovered him, especially certain neighbors who made no secret of their loyalty to the Crown, he wouldn't last an hour. She hesitated only a moment before sliding her arm under his. "Come on. We need to get you off the road." He was heavier than she'd guessed, his frame solid with the build of a man accustomed to long marches and battles. Each step was a strain, Her legs trembled with the effort. Still she half-guided, half-dragged him toward the narrow path leading to her family's old smokehouse, a place so rarely used now that no one would think to check it. Once inside, the dim light revealed just how pale he had grown. His hands shook as he sank to the floor. Clara found a strip of linen from a forgotten bundle of cloth and pressed it to his wound. He flinched but said nothing. "You'll need food, water." "Water first," he said, voice almost fading. Clara fetched a small jug from her home, careful not to draw attention. When she returned, he drank greedily, then leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. "I never asked your name," she said quietly. He opened his eyes, studying her with a guarded expression, as if weighing whether to trust her. Finally he said, "Captain Elias Reed. And if you're wise, you'll forget it." The name sent a jolt through her. She had heard whispers, tales told by passing patriots of a captain whose daring raids had cost the British dearly. If this was truly Elias Reed, then the man sitting in her smokehouse was not just any soldier. He was one the enemy would pay dearly to capture. Clara glanced toward the small cracks in the wood where daylight slipped in. Somewhere out there, British patrols were hunting. She wasn't sure if it was courage or foolishness that had led her to bring him here, but one thing was certain: she could never tell a soul. The morning after Captain Elias Reed's arrival, the air in Ashford felt different, thick, charged. Clara was tending to her small garden when she heard them before she saw them. The rhythmic thud of boots striking dirt, the faint jingle of metal buckles. British soldiers. She froze, her hands tightening on the wooden handle of her spade. Down the road, a column of redcoats emerged from the bend, their scarlet coats catching the sunlight, muskets slung over their shoulders. At their head rode a stern-faced officer on a bay horse, scanning each house as they passed. Her pulse quickened. They were here for him. They had to be. The soldiers began speaking to villagers, and Clara could hear bits of conversation drifting on the breeze. "A rebel officer. Wounded. Seen near here. Orders from Major Cartwright. Search every home." Her stomach twisted. The smokehouse was hidden, but it was close enough to her home that a thorough search might reveal it. Elias wasn't in any shape to move. His wound had bled again during the night despite her bandaging. She'd given him broth at dawn, and he'd barely managed a few sips. Clara straightened, forcing herself to keep working the soil as if nothing were wrong. Drawing attention would be the worst thing she could do. Within minutes, 2 soldiers approached her garden. "You there," one barked. "Have you seen any strangers pass through?" Clara kept her gaze down. "Strangers come through now and then. I've seen no one wounded." The taller soldier narrowed his eyes. "We'll need to check your home." Her heart skipped, but she nodded. "Of course." She led them inside, praying silently. The house was small, just 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen. They looked under the bed, opened the cupboards, even checked the small loft. One soldier sniffed the air, as if expecting to smell gunpowder. "Where's your father?" the shorter one asked. "He's gone," Clara said evenly. "It's just my mother and me now." They exchanged a glance and stepped back outside, apparently satisfied. But as they left, the taller soldier lingered, scanning the yard. His gaze swept toward the tree line, the direction of the old smokehouse. Clara's chest tightened. She bent down, pretending to examine the garden rows. "Will you be searching the wells next?" she asked, forcing a light tone. "Old Mrs. Hensley swears she saw someone stealing water last night." That drew his attention away. He muttered something about speaking to her next and followed his comrade down the road. Clara waited until the sound of their boots faded before heading for the smokehouse. Inside, Elias was propped against the wall, a pistol in hand, his face pale but alert. "They were here," she said quietly. "I heard," he replied. "We may not have much time." The weight of his words settled heavily on her. For the first time she realized the truth. If the British found him here, she would not just be called weak, she would be called a traitor. And in these times that could mean the gallows. By late afternoon, The sound of boots and clinking metal had become part of the air itself. The British were not leaving. From the small crack in the smokehouse wall, Clara had watched them fan out across the village, questioning every soul, searching barns and sheds. They were closing in. Inside, Captain Elias Reed's strength was fading. The fever from his wound left his face pale, his breathing shallow. Yet when she mentioned moving him, his eyes sharpened. "If I stay, they'll find me. You'll hang. We have to go now." Clara's mind spun. The main road was crawling with redcoats. Any attempt there would end in chains. But she knew of another way. A narrow deer trail through the marshes west of the village, half forgotten except by hunters. It was treacherous even in daylight, but under nightfall, it might be their only chance. She waited for the last hints of sunset to bleed from the sky before making her move. Wrapping Elias's torso with fresh bandages, she helped him to his feet. His weight pressed heavily on her shoulder, but she gritted her teeth and pushed forward. Every step was a test of silence. The smokehouse door creaked faintly as they slipped into the cool night. Crickets sang in the fields, masking the faint rustle of their passage. Clara's ears strained for the rhythm of soldiers' boots, but for now there was only the wind. The marsh path was uneven, the ground soft and slick. Twice Elias stumbled, and both times Clara caught him before he fell. Her muscles screamed from the effort, but she didn't slow. She could almost hear the village's voices in her head. "She's too weak to carry her own weight, let alone anyone else's." And yet here she was, dragging the British's most wanted man through the dark, one step at a time. They were halfway through when a shout echoed faintly behind them. Torches flickered in the distance. The patrol had discovered the empty smokehouse. "Keep going," Elias urged, his voice hoarse. "Don't stop." Her breath came hard, but she obeyed, guiding him deeper into the reeds until the lights vanished from view. The smell of wet earth clung to them as they emerged onto the far bank, where the treeline rose like a wall. Beyond it lay the road to the rebel lines. At the edge of the trees, Elias paused, leaning heavily on her. "Clara, you've saved more than my life tonight. Those orders I carry, they could change the tide of the war." She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded. From the shadows, a whistle sounded, the signal of a Patriot scout. Two men emerged, muskets at the ready, their expressions shifting to surprise at the sight of her. "This is Captain Reed," she said, her voice steady. "He needs to reach your lines." They took him carefully, but before disappearing into the trees, Elias looked back. "You're stronger than they'll ever understand." And then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. When Clara returned to Ashford at dawn, no one knew where she had been. The whispers about her weakness continued, but she no longer heard them the same way. She knew the truth, and somewhere so did the man the British feared most.